This time I'll call this regular monthly meeting to order of the Shell Rock River Watershed District. And look for approval of agenda.
So moved.
Second.
I'll second.
Any other discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Agenda approved. Anybody from the public that would like to speak to the Watershed District this morning? Please.
Good morning. My name's Annette Peterson at 2005 Wilby Circle. And I'm here today just to get information. There's a lot of conversation floating around the community about what's going to happen with the dredging, who's going to get dredged, who's not. I'm concerned for two reasons. One, professionally, I'm executive director at Senior Resources, and I'm on many committees that are promoting Albert Lea. How can we make it a better place? How can we capitalize on our waterways? And it seems to me that the bays around Bancroft Bay Park, which there's several names for those bays, are prime recreational waterways for canoes, kayaks. With the boathouse just around the corner and in the channel, people that rent those or bring their own, they can go into the big lake and manage all the waves, or they can go back toward our bay and have the nice, quiet, recreational expectation that canoers and kayakers do. So I think it's an important piece for the commission to look at and make sure that that's considered when the areas are chosen to be dredged. And then the second reason that it's of importance to me is I live on it. I look across the water at Bancroft Bay Park. It's a treasure for the community, for the county, and I'd like to make sure that the water is pleasant to look at, is okay to smell, and we see some real recreational activities going on there. So I'm here just to hear, to listen, and become more and more informed, and to have a clear understanding of what the intentions are.
Okay. Would you like to respond to that?
Sure. As we know that we've had now Anita, and prior to this meeting we had some people at the fair from Bancroft Bay that approached us, and then our last meeting we had about 15 individuals from Bancroft Bay area. And the intention right now, or what the board is considering, is a small path along the residence up into Bancroft Bay so that they can access the main portion of the lake. But extensive dredging in Bancroft Bay is limited. We are looking at a small portion closer to the inlet of Wedge Creek, or Bancroft Creek, that will make a deeper site and remove some of the loading sedimentation back there. But for the most part, in Bancroft Bay, dredging will be limited.
Anybody else? Nick?
It is part of the natural ecosystem of the whole body of water at Fountain Lake, and it is a fish hatchery back there and a spawning area, and you know, we see a lot of the native the turtles and the birds and the nesting birds, and that's kind of their haven back in Bancroft Bay. Maybe even Janine could comment on Bancroft Bay, but that would be our how we're looking at Bancroft Bay.
Yeah, that's an accurate reflection.
I'm Janine Borland. I'm the area wildlife manager, and Brett was, he made an accurate reflection of our very early discussions when Fountain Lake dredging was initially discussed with DNR staff. We did express a similar concern of Bancroft Bay because of the high wildlife and fisheries value of the shallow habitat as it exists.
So the areas in front of the homes that are there will be dredged, but the majority of the Bancroft Bay will not be.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah?
Some of the residents out there have actually contacted the DNR and they are telling them something a little bit different. I think we have to get that cleared up.
And what are they telling them?
They're saying that that's part of the lake, the Fountain Lake, and there's no restrictions on it. That's what they're telling, that's what I've heard.
Well, here we go.
I actually just came here to listen, but just, the DNR is a wide, is a wide and broad organization, so I don't necessarily hear all the contacts. Just from an agency standpoint, though, we have not completed any permit review. And so we don't have final plans and that sort of thing. So any Fountain Lake is a public water, so any dredging will require a permit from our Division of Waters as well as Corps of Engineers. And so the, you know, there's no final determinations have been made what would be permitted and where, you know, we're continuing to work with the watershed district, and I believe we're trying to coordinate with staff and the board to make sure that there's the greatest benefit from a water quality standpoint with the least environmental damage, and some of the environmental, you know, and as many of the environmental services provided by the lake as it is now are maintained. But we, you know, there are serious water quality problems, and this is one thing that Watershed District has looked at, and the DNR will look at it as a partner.
Thank you.
So, as you can hear, we have to be permitted, we have to meet the qualifications of the DNR and Army Corps of Engineers and MPCA and everybody else. Any other questions on that? Okay. Anybody else from the public that would like to speak? Okay, item 4, approval of minutes. Look for a motion to accept the minutes of June 24th of the advisory committee meeting. We doing that again?
Accept the minutes, not approval.
Accept the minutes, okay.
Accept.
There we go. Anybody like to make that motion?
So moved.
All right, any other discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Motion to approve minutes of July 12th regular board meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Motion to approve the minutes of July 26th special board meeting.
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Item 5 is the approval of the treasurer's report. Motion to approve the July 2016 treasurer's report subject to audit.
So moved.
Have a second?
I'll second it.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. A motion to approve the July 2016 non-property tax treasurer's report subject to audit.
I'll make that motion.
Have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carried. Item 6 is the Lake Foundation's report. Laura Cunningham.
Good morning. Just a few things to touch on here this morning. We did have our regularly scheduled monthly meeting on July 27th, at which point we basically discussed moving forward with our campaign for the local option sales tax renewal on the ballot in November. And it was approved, the language was approved at the last city council meeting. So from the city's, standpoint, from the local standpoint, we're basically ready to move forward with that. We are gonna have that vote on November 8th during the general election. And so our group is very much kind of in the throes of designing some different logos and ideas. So right now, I think we have our draft version ready to go. Our next meeting will be the time that we vote on that design. And from there, I think it's gonna be just hit the ground running and try to get some good information out to the public so they are very aware and understand how important it is that we continue moving forward with the local option sales tax to support clean water projects. We've got, for sure, 15 years of projects that are gonna need that support. So it's done wonders to this point, and we can't wait to see that happen again. So just a quick update to you all on that. We are also firming up some education sessions, and the city is partnering with us, as well as we're hoping some watershed board members and some city councilors to come to those education sessions and just give a brief overview of some of the watersheds projects and then some of the partnership projects on behalf of the city, and kind of discuss those, and then also have some of the new up-and-coming information that you guys have on the Fountain Lake project available for the public at that meeting, so that hopefully we can get, you know, some general understanding of where things are at from the timeline perspective, and just all of the things that go into that project. I learned a lot at your last meeting that there's at least 12 permits that will need to be obtained before that moves forward. And I think that's not general knowledge. That's something that needs to be communicated and have people get a chance to ask questions on what are all these permits. I know you've obtained already some of them to begin the disposal facility construction, but I don't think it's widely known by the community. So I will give you the for sure dates on that. We have some tentative dates scheduled, but we are going to be having them at the Edgewater Pavilion. So a beautiful setting to have some about hour and a half meetings. So, and not meetings, fun events is what I meant to say. And then one thing we're really excited about, this past Saturday, the 13th, we hosted again Albert Lee Floats. And that is a non-motorized floating festival on Albert Lee Lake. And I know some of you were in attendance, so thank you. We did put exactly 300 people out on the water on a canoe, a kayak, or a paddle board. And it sounds like the paddle boards are becoming ever more popular. So that's where you're almost standing on like a surfboard and using your strength to paddle yourself around. So the equipment was out. They had every single piece of equipment from Community Ed down at Frank Hall Park. Every piece of equipment was out for the whole day. So it was pretty amazing to watch. A little boy who had never been in a kayak before by himself, he thought he could do it. His dad was like, I don't know about this. And he came back, and I think we have a lifelong adventure on our hands because he was so excited. And he was, I think, 6 or 7 years old. So, I mean, that's pretty cool. And that was an event that is still being paid for by our Anheuser-Busch grant matching dollars for hosting that event. So, pretty cool. And first year ever, they also had bicycles for rent. The community education team purchased 15 bicycles. And they're kind of novel bicycles. They have either the high handlebars or they have the wide tires. So something different for people to try. So we literally had people converging on a water trail and a bike trail all on the same day. State bike trail, state water trail. It was just awesome. Filled my little heart. So very, very happy about that. 92 people used bikes who probably wouldn't have used water equipment. So it was good to have both types of vessel there for everyone to use. So very exciting. Our next meeting, I think I did mention that earlier, August 24th at 4 p.m. And basically at that meeting, we're going to be voting on everything necessary to move forward for the November activities. So I will keep you posted. But yes, we are basically ready to rock and roll and ready to start communicating to the public what's necessary to A, pass it, and then B, move forward for the next 15 years. So clean water is definitely the most important thing I can think of. So that's all I have.
Thank you.
Thank you, very good.
Thank you.
Okay, Rob.
Mr. Chair, managers, in your packets, you'll see the committee appointments. Everybody's had ample amount of time to pick their committees. Hearing from some of you, or not, lack of hearing from some of you, I took it upon myself with the chair and put names where we felt it was appropriate. And if I don't hear any objections today, I would like to have the board approve this committee list. And Leah will then divide out all committees and send you a personal email that what committees that you are on.
Mr. Chair, I'm fine with it.
Is that a motion?
Yeah, move to approve.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Now we're in discussion.
Mr. Chair, I'm fine with them.
Okay. Okay. Any other discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you. Next is a motion to approve the 2015 audit. You have the audit packet in front of you. We have Andy here today to briefly cover the audit and cover any questions the managers may have. Andy?
Good morning. I'm Andy Burnoff from Hillers, Walls, and Benda. I've been preparing your audit for the last few years now. I'll briefly go through it. I won't spend a couple hours going through it in detail because by the end you won't be catching a lot of it anyway. If you have any questions, feel free to stop me as we go through it so I can answer it when we're looking at those items. Or if you have questions at the end, or if you have questions later on, feel free to give me a call. This turning ahead to the table of contents, there's the two funds, the sales tax fund, which is the project fund, and the general fund. Under basic financial statements, there's government-wide financial statements. So those are the two funds, but they include the assets being depreciated out, and then the long-term accounts payable and things like that. We're down below the fund financial statements. They don't, when assets are bought, they just get expensed out. So it's the same funds, but basically showing two different ways of accounting. So we'll take a look through that. Then down a little bit lower, the combining and individual fund statements and supplementary information. Basically that just gives you more detail for the reports. Page 1 is a list of appointed officers. Won't go through that. Page 2 is a independent auditor's report, which is probably the most important page. It has a clean opinion this year, so everything was good. So I won't read through it, but turning ahead, page 4 is a management discussion and analysis. So this basically is a year overview written by the manager, the management. So I won't go through that either. Then page 7 is where the financial statements start. So the statement of net position, this is a government-wide statement. So this looking on the bottom of the assets, capital assets net of depreciation was $6.5 million in 2015. and 14 was about 6.2 million, so that was up about 300,000. Deferred outflows of resources, under liabilities, the net pension liability, and then deferred pension resources. That's new this year, so I'll explain that quick. What that is for your para retirement account. Basically, it's underfunded. All the governments pay into it. So if they ever had to catch up, the watershed would be liable for that net pension liability under that. So in 14 was 277,000. In 15 was 295,000. So basically that's new this year. In the past, we never had to show that, but the accounting regulations changed, so that got added. So basically it decreased your total net position by about that 277,000. So your total net assets basically went down. Turning ahead to page 8. This is a statement of activities, so the government-wide financial statements, basically the income statement. This looking, it's kind of upside down, but the expenses are on top. So the total primary government expenses was about 3 million. The year before was 2,460,000, so that was up. But if you look at your total general revenues, that was close to 4 million. Year before was 1.6 million, so that was up significantly. And the main reason for that, if you look up the second line from the bottom there on grants, you got 2.2 million in 2015, where in 14 you got 23,000 in grants. So that's the main difference for the year there. Turning ahead to page 9. This is the balance sheet, so this gets into the fund financial statement, so it don't show the assets being depreciated out in that. This looking down under the total fund balances at the bottom, the general fund was at 188,000, and then the planning and implementation fund was at 1.3 million, which total cash and investments up on top was 1,332,000. The year before was 864,000, so that was up good. But as you know, it can go fast once you start your dredging project and that. I'll talk to Brett about. Page 10, I won't go through it, but it basically shows the difference between the government-wide statements and the fund financial statements. So it takes one number, shows the differences to come up with other numbers, so it reconciles it. Page 11 is a statement of revenues, expenditures, and changes in fund balance. So this is the fund financial, basically, income statements. This looking at the bigger changes, the grants we already talked about, they were at 2.3 million compared to 33,000 the year before on the fund financial statements. Projects you spend about 1.6 million in 2015. In 14 you spent about 1.2 million. And then capital outlay projects, so these were items that got added to the balance assets on the government-wide statements. It's at about 650,000 in 15, which was up from about 500,000 in 14. So turning ahead, page 12 again is just a reconciliation between the government-wide statements and the fund financial statements, so I won't go through that. Then we get to page 13 of the notes to the financial statements. There's just a couple things. Page 14, about in the middle, shows the general fund and gives the description. And then the special revenue planning and implementation fund, so it just details that out. Turning ahead, page 18, under deposits, the state requires banks to have collateral pledged. So if something happened to the bank, you wouldn't be out your money or that when it's over FDIC insurance. In the past, you've been below that in previous years, but this year you had enough collateral pledge, so everything was good there, so that looked good. Then turning ahead, page 20, note 5 is a new para footnote, so that kind of go through all the para information about the liabilities and that, but I won't read through it. And then page 25, note number 11, excessive expenditures over budget. So the general fund spent about $32,000 in excess of budget for 2015. It's still at a profit for the year, but we just gotta mention it when it's over the budget amount. And then on page 26, note number 14, change in accounting standards. We talked about that para liability. That footnote basically explains what it is, or the changes that showed up on 14 retroactive or that. So if you want to see that, you can read through that. Turning ahead to the required supplementary information, page 27 and 28 are basically detail on the para retirement accounts on their new from the past. We didn't have to have those forms in there. Page 29 is a budgetary comparison schedule. So it gives a good detail on the general fund, where you're at compared to your budget. Let's looking at that total revenue is we're at $251,000, where your budget was $250,000, so that was real close. Insurance was at about $12,000, your budget was $6,000, so that was higher. So total expenditures were $234,000, where you had budgeted $201,000, so that's where you're over your budget on expenditures. And then your net change, you still gained about $17,000 in the general fund. Turning ahead, so this is basically the general fund balance financial statements. Then page 32 and 33 are the planning and implementation fund balance financial statements. So it just gives you a little more detail on this. We already kind of went through it in the previous pages, but just hitting a couple highlights. On page 31, the revenue is over under expenditures. The general fund gained about $17,000, where the year before gained about $15,000, so it was pretty consistent. And then turning ahead to the planning and implementation fund, on page 32, the cash and investments were about $1.1 million, where the year before they're about $700,000, so your cash did go up there. And part of that was grants, and some of that kind of reimbursed the year before expenditures that were higher, so you kind of caught up from your loss the year before. Page 33 is the revenue through the revenue expenditures and changes in fund balance for the planning and implementation fund. We already talked about the grants being up in the project, so I won't go through that again. Page 34 is supplementary information for the special revenue fund. So it splits it out by area. So this is the balance sheet by area, and then the next two pages are the income statement by area. So you can see what liabilities you have or accounts payable by area. And then page 36 and 37 shows the revenues and expenditures by area. So the only thing I'll point out there is on page 36, the revenues over under expenditures was $209,204. So you brought more money in than you spent, but you spent more the previous year. So that got allocated back out just to show as unallocated like you normally do. So is there any questions yet or anything before I move on? I'm going through it kind of fast, but. Okay. And then other reports, report on internal control on page 38. We talk about the lack of segregation of duties, and that this means you don't have a lot of people in your office to split up duties like big companies or that do. But board oversight, you looking through the invoice list and someone looking at the bank statements and things like that helps. So it's normal for smaller governments to have this note in here. And then turning ahead, I just want to mention on page 40 is a independent auditor's report on Minnesota legal compliance. So everything looked pretty good. The only thing that I wrote on here was that the district did not comply with the claims and disbursement section. And what it is, the state requires the board to approve all expenses before they get paid, unless you have a resolution to pay them beforehand. And you have a resolution for payroll expenses. But in the beginning of 15, when you do pay those, you need to list them at the next board meeting. And you started listing them, I think, in October. So the beginning of the year, it wasn't listed after they were paid. And then there's also a couple other expenses that didn't get approved before the board. It was paid before it was approved, because I think they were due before the board meeting or that. But they were legitimate expenses, but I've still got to mention it on here, so.
And just to follow up, the reason why it started in October is following our last year's audit. So we corrected it after
Right.
we got
Yeah,
audited last
yeah.
year, and then
And then I
Yeah.
think, Brett, you did do a resolution authorizing you up to a certain dollar amount, so that's in the record, and then it has to be at the next meeting, is that,
correct,
that's
yep.
correct? Yeah.
Right. And then there's a loose sheet of paper, that's just basically a standard letter that we give out, talking about our audit and things like that, so I won't read through that. Is there any questions at all? I went through it briefly, but.
Any questions?
And if you come see something later, if you're going through it closer, feel free to give me a call or that, and I can try to answer it at that time too, so.
Thank you.
And I do want to thank the board for the opportunity to do the audit, and Carmen and Brett, they're good to work with to get me the information and that like usual, so I want to thank you guys.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Need a motion to approve, Mr. Chair.
Yeah. Someone care to make the motion to approve the 2015 audit?
Mr. Chair, I'll introduce that motion.
Do you have a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. So evidently you're gonna take Andy's spot here, are you?
Yes, first item, actually Matt is gonna cover the, motion to approve a warranty deed to the state of Minnesota for the 5.3 acre parcel in section 25 in Albert Lee Township, commonly referred to as the Headwaters 2. The chair and secretary are then authorized to execute the deed and other documents necessary to complete this transfer. The chair's not here today. Do we wanna make that, Mr. Pistorius?
Yeah, I think the motion should be amended to read the chair or vice chair and secretary are authorized to sign.
Speak to it? or-
Yeah, as way of background, this is what we're referred to as Headwaters 2, if you recall. Headwaters 1 was the 200-plus acres that was purchased for the Albert Lee Lake Dam, and then the Headwaters property, which earlier this year, the district turned over to the DNR as part of the Lessard Dams agreement, so that property was turned over to the DNR. I'm gonna get dangerous here, Janine, so you can correct me. I think that is an AMA project.
It is.
So that's a aquatic management area, so that's a certain division with it in the DNR, and they have requirements on how they're to manage that property. There were a couple carve-out acreages that were adjacent to this property. And so this 5.3 acre project that we're talking about now is what we're referring to as Headwaters 2. This property was funded through a Clean Water Legacy grant. That sound correct, Janine? Clean Water Legacy. I won't hold you to it. And so it's a different funding source, and this property is being turned over to the DNR with the understanding it's going to be under Parks and Trails. So it is a little bit of a different management structure within the DNR. And so really all we're doing today is just approving the deed of gift is what it's called. It's part of the grant requirement. What the district's been doing is obtaining grants either through Srrwd's Clean Water Legacy or other grant sources, doing the legwork, getting the property in a condition to turn over to the DNR. And so today's motion is merely a formality just to turn this piece over to the DNR for them to manage.
Okay. Someone care to make that motion?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
Just a little clarification, in section 25, is that,
That's the, part of the Headwaters property, so that's the, is that County Road 25 that goes by there?
It's the southeast corner of the Headwaters property on the west bank of the Shell Rock,
It's the bridge north of Glenville, it's immediately adjacent to
the
the
Uland Road.
Yeah.
yep,
Yep.
I got it then. Thank you.
Any other discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Fountain Lake Restoration Project, the update is this, the committee is still meeting. As you, all of you have had probably an opportunity to sit in those committee meetings, but every Thursday they're held with our consultant, NRT. And we sent out the EAW on August 1st to the Environmental Quality Board, and that is where all 12 of the permitting agencies will have an opportunity to comment. All the agencies will have an opportunity to comment, and the public has an opportunity to comment on the EAW. What's important to note is that we put together the EAW in a couple to 3 weeks' time, and there's a lot of really good information in there, and it's important for the managers to read it and the community to read it. And at that point, after the 30-day review, it's up to the board, this board, to decide if we will do an environmental impact statement. So we'll be talking about that a lot more in detail when that time comes. But as of yet, we haven't had any comment back. Our last committee meeting, we talked about some dredge cuts and then focused on where we're gonna start. And I think it's kind of the opinion of the committee that we start in Edgewater Bay. From a staff level standpoint, we want you to start in Edgewater Bay simply because we're trying to get the most that fits cell 1 of phase 1 of the dredging project in the CDF, and the portion of the lake that we can remove the most sedimentation in the most amount of time, or the shortest amount of time. And so it boils down to production. And so Edgewater makes the most sense. At some point, this board has to decide if that is indeed where they're gonna start the project. But it'll be phase 1, and it'll probably take 2 years to maybe 2.5 years to finish phase 1. Mr. Chair, you sit on the committee. Maybe you could provide some other information on what we've been talking about. Or Mick, or Al.
I don't know, I guess it's be tough without questions, but I firmly believe that Edgewater is the place to start it for many reasons. We do go through enormous amounts of information every Thursday and have a company that we work with that is consulting with us, so I think everything's being covered. We can only have 3 managers at those meetings, so I don't know if everyone's got to be at one of those meetings or so, or not, but I don't have any other. Mick, you have anything?
All I can say is that there's a lot more that needs to be done before the final decisions gonna be made that I can see anyway. There's a lot of things we have to look at. And, we're doing that at every meeting, the way it looks to me.
Yeah, for the public's sake, the managers that do sit on this committee do go through lots of information. And you know, these meetings last from 1 to 2 hours every Thursday, and they've been doing it now for a couple months. So it's really difficult in an hour meeting to recap everything that you guys have gone through. And it started at 2 months ago, so.
Al?
I just make a couple of comments. One is we've looked at our property that we own at the former golf course. We need that area for siting of the pipes and equipment and stuff. So that's, and then it opens up the access to the lake there. St. John's has worked with us tremendously for access. Matt's taking care of that for us. I look at some of the common sense ideas that we need to overwinter the equipment probably. So we need to look at electricity in that area. We need to look at whether we're gonna use electric pumps on the lake versus diesel. So there's all those decisions are coming together here. And I think that the board or the committee has done their work in trying to put it all together. And then when the full board can sit down for a day and go through each option, I think you'll see that maybe that Edgewater kind of looks that way for us as the prime area first. But thank you.
Okay. Picker Lake?
That's all I have, Mr. Chair, and I believe, Courtney, you're gonna do an update on Pickerel Lake? Filling in for Andy. He
Yeah.
needed a much-needed vacation.
I'll try my
Takes three of
best.
us to fill Andy's shoes.
I believe you got the Pickerel Lake Dam in design last meeting, but it is roughly at 95% completion. The design was sent to Bowser and DNR for review. Bowser did reply, and we are gonna have their comments and our response to those comments at the next meeting, although DNR did not respond. They did approve the public waters permit for that project. Now that we have the Pickerel Lake Subcommittee approved, we're gonna be working in the next 2 weeks to get that together with the landowners to fill them in. Also, I talked to the legal staff, and they will be reviewing the bid packet later this week. So staff will probably be asking for a motion at next meeting to approve the bid packet. And then also, the first draft of the joint powers agreement is in the DNR's hand for them to review. So, that's what I have. Any questions?
Any other questions? Thank you.
Yep.
Authorized payment of bills. Agenda item 9A is the claims totaling $55,832.15. For motion to approve.
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carried. 9B is the non-property tax disbursements totaling $450,498.29. For motion to approve.
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Item 10 is managers' items. Do you have any?
I have a couple today, I guess. I got the opportunity to look at the Goose Lake Fish Barrier the other day. Andy isn't here to give us more details, I guess, but my understanding it's not working very well, if at all. And I think the board needs to be aware of that if there's some design flaws or some things we need to correct it, we need to look at them. I think,
What is the problem? Flow?
Flow.
Flow is
It operates, but it's not functioning correctly.
because of the not enough flow.
Not enough flow, yep.
the size of the fish barrier looks plenty good for high floodwater areas, but in the low drainage or low flow, you could just barely see the water moving.
Well, if you
when I
had,
heard that, so,
this has got to be above average summer for rain.
right.
If you got a low flow during this year, I'd say you got a problem.
So I'd like to see the board, look at some solutions sooner than later, than to sit here for a year or 18 months trying to figure out what's gonna happen. So when maybe we can put it on the agenda next month and see if there's some solutions to it or whatever, but,
Okay?
I've got one more item too.
Go ahead.
I wasn't necessary to have Andy here for this, but on our page 25 of our audit, we've collected 10,885 of the 13,760 of an accounts receivable, and I know that it's been there for a couple of years or a year and a half or whatever. So I'd like to see it taken care of. So if we can do a little more, whether it's legal work or if it has to go on the taxes or whatever, but as a government agency, usually you clean up these things as we go along, and I'd like to see it cleaned up, so.
And the amount is?
10,885.
That's, no, the balance is less than 3,000, isn't it, or 3,100?
We can get back to you on that.
Well, according to the audit,
According to the audit, it's 3,000
a
something.
little over, and I think it's several smaller amounts, so sometimes they're the harder ones to get, so, but I'd like to see it cleaned up is what I'm saying, so. So if Matt could bring us some recommendations next month or whatever, finish it up by the end of the year, so, thank you.
At the latest, yeah. Okay, any other managers' items? I guess, I don't know, with the Lakes Foundation efforts, but I think there's one of the problems that we have with this watershed is that we do a lot of work and spend a lot of time at these meetings, and it's not communicated to the public probably well enough as to how much time and effort the Board of Managers puts in. They can rest assured because everything is discussed and gone over by this group, and I believe it's a good group, and everything is being looked at the way it should be. Every idea is being considered. So that's just my comment today, that the public doesn't always hear what's going on. It's not that easy. Like someone said just a little bit ago, you meet 2 hours a week for 10 weeks. How are we going to talk about it in 5 minutes or 10? I think the thing to look at for the public probably would be the amount of time this Board of Managers and staff spend at this project. If they understood that, then they'd have a better understanding of what goes on. Any other managers' items today?
Maybe you could just announce, we're gonna have our budget planning, is that coming up here?
Yeah, I think we should postpone it because we have a poor turnout, but I would like to have it, we were gonna have the workshop today, but I think if we could table that and postpone that workshop for August 30th at the county boardroom after our next scheduled meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so not having a workshop today then.
Well, we still can, I mean, there's 4 of you, but, I mean, we're talking about the budget, so I think it's important that we have the entire, at least,
As many as you can.
yeah.
I agree.
Okay? So the next meeting on August 30th will be in the county boardroom
Yes, this room is taken, so
at 8:30, and the workshop
to follow.
to follow. Also at the county. All right, take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
We are adjourned.